Our first chapter, the time value of money. As individuals in our life, we often face decisions that involves either the saving of money or the borrowing of money. We save money for future use, or we borrow money for current consumption. So to be able to determine, you want, the amount we need to invest today for the future savings, or to determine the cost of borrowing money, here we need to understand the principle of time value of money, the principle of calculation of the interests and the reimbursements, how to make the reimbursements. Also, as professionals, as for example, as investment analysts later, much of our work will require evaluating different transactions that occur in the present or in the future. We will use different cash flows, different inflows of money or outflows of money that occur at different times. So to be able to evaluate all these transactions, we need to master, if you want, the mathematics of time value of money, to be able to take the accurate decision, the optimal decision. So this is why it is important for us to understand the logic, to understand the language of the finance first. To introduce this chapter, let's start with a basic question. Suppose that you are offered the choice between having $100 today and having the same amount, $100, 1 year from now. What would you prefer and why? Here, usually, we will prefer to get the money earlier, to get the money now. Why? Because simply we can use the money in an investment project. We can invest the money in a project, or we can simply put the money in the bank, in the savings account that pays interest. For example, if the interest rate is 10%, or if we can earn on any investment we will make today 10% return gain, 10%. If we invest $100 today, these $100 will generate for us 1 year from now 10% of the amount invested, which represents $10. So $100 invested today, 1 year from now, will worth 110. According to this basic example, $100 received today is worth more than $100 received after 1 year. And this explains basically the utility of the knowing and understanding the time value of money. The principle behind this concept of time value of money is that the value of 1 unit of currency, of $1, 1 dinar, etc., can vary over time. It's not the same over time. $1 today is different from $1 that we will receive 6 months from now or 1 year from now. In other words, a sum of money received today is worth more than if the same is received after a certain period of time. And here, individuals value a given amount of money more highly the earlier it is received. Why? Simply because they can, as we explained, they can invest it and earn interest on it, earn a return on it. According to this principle, a smaller amount of money now may be equivalent in value to a larger amount received at a future date. Why? As we said in the previous example, this occurs because many of the interest rate And what represent these interest rates? The interest rates represent the return that you can obtain if you invest your money. The gain that you can obtain if you invest your money today. At the same time, the interest rate represents the cost you have to pay if you borrow money to be able to consume today. So borrowing money will involve a cost, we call it the interest rate, the cost of borrowing money. Investing money will generate a return, which is the interest rate that you can earn, your yield, if you want, we call it yield, return, interest, that you can earn if you invest your money. How interest rates are set? Economics tells us that the interest rates are set by the forces of supply and demand. The investors are the supplier, and the borrower are the demanders of funds. From the suppliers of funds perspective, as investors, we often view the interest rates as a compensation for bearing risk. So when you decide to lend your money, you will demand a compensation for different risks. First, you will demand a compensation for delaying your consumption risklessly. What do we mean by this? When you save your money, when you invest your money, you will postpone your consumption. Postpone your consumption today to convince you, if you want, to postpone your consumption, to delay your consumption today. The borrower had to pay you, if you want, a compensation which is measured by what we call in finance the real risk-free rate. It means we will demand, at least from the borrower, a return and interest equal to what you can earn if you invest your money in a risk-free asset. The risk-free asset in finance is estimated by the US Treasury bills, we call them. We will come back to these techniques and these different categories of bills, bonds, etc. in the chapter 5 to better understand this. Just here an introduction to if you want, explain to you the component of the interest rate. So the first component of the interest rate, we call it I or R, is a risk-free interest rate. This will cover, if you want, the time value of money we explained before. Because when you will not consume today, you will lend your money, you have to be compensated for delaying this consumption, regardless to the inflation in the economy. We ignore the inflation. Now, since in the real life, inflation will exist. So when you postpone your consumption in the future, you will not consume today, you have to buy the asset at a higher price in general. So according to the inflation rate, you will demand, in addition to the risk-free rate of the first component, you will demand an additional premium, an extra return, we call it an extra interest. And this extra interest is a compensation for the inflation risk. So we call it the inflation risk premium. Also, a third component of the interest rate, according to the borrower, you will demand an extra return, a compensation for the risk that the borrower will not make the promised payments at the promised time. We call it the default risk premium because each investor or each borrower has its own default risk, the risk that he will not be able to reimburse you. And this risk is not measured by individuals. We have rating agencies that analyze the financial situation